This is FinTech Futures at Sibos in Frankfurt. I'm joined by Dyanne Carenza of Scotiabank. Dyanne, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us today. How are you enjoying the conference so far?
Fantastic. We were chatting earlier. The city is great, this conference center, and the content and the buzz, it's really high energy this year. It's great.
Excellent, excellent. So I guess just to get started, we'd like to quickly introduce yourself and your role at Scotiabank.
Certainly. So I have the privilege of leading the trade and working capital business at Scotiabank. And really what that is all about is helping our clients right across the globe navigate some of the volatility and mitigate their risks as they're doing their cross-border business activity.
So you're giving a talk this week titled Global Trade No Longer Plays by Old Rules, Reimagining Trade Corridors Between Europe, North America and LATAM. For those not in attendance, what are the key takeaways from your session?
So there's a couple of them. The first key message really is that there is a lot of change in the very dynamic trade landscape. So as we're looking at and as we're seeing the different geopolitical, I referenced earlier, changes that are going on, we're seeing new corridors. So it's no longer about this big bang globalization, this sprawl of relationships. It's a little more targeted, a re-globalization or a regionalization. And in particular, that Europe, Americas, North America, and into South America corridor, we're seeing amplified and increasing flows. I mean, historically, they've always been there, right? Colombian coffee has been coming to Europe for decades. And similarly, the Europeans have been exporting their wines. But now we're seeing a broader variety of goods as well as services being traded across those corridors. And then you add on to that the digital infrastructure that's enabling that and more efficient and transparent payment flows. So you put all of that together, and it is something positive that's coming out of what can be seen as turbulent times.
So you recently wrote an article on this topic, and you mentioned that by 2035, as much as 3 trillion in global trade is expected to reroute toward regional corridors. What key factors are driving this shift, would you say?
So when you think about the last 5 to 10 years, we've had a few disruptions. So between the Trump 1.0, the shifts in trade policy, we've had Brexit and COVID, and that really showed that there was some fragility in the supply chains. So instead of the global sprawl, really looking to hone in, maybe bring things a little bit closer to home to have a little more flexibility, reduce costs logistically, ships crossing the oceans and the time to inventories. So as opposed to just in time and going to the lowest cost provider, looking for resiliency. I think that's one of the main elements that drove the companies to kind of rethink their supply chain structures. Secondly, they now have more frameworks that actually can guide and give them a sense of comfort as they look to these new markets. So you have CETA, so Canada and Europe. And actually recently I was chatting with somebody, and apparently in the last 18 months, we've actually seen 15% increase of flows from Canada into Europe. So clearly the CETA framework is serving its purpose. Then we have the EU Mercosur and EU Mexico as well. And there too, we're seeing additional flows, and we're optimistic that we'll continue to see that as producers and consumers of goods look to different markets to be able to share. And thirdly, the digital infrastructure for payments is catching up. We have the Digital EU LAC Alliance, which is really increasing security, smoothing out the payment rails, and transparency of payments. So that also, obviously, every trade transaction ultimately ends up in a payment.
Great, great. And what do you consider to be the most outdated trade practices then, and that businesses need to abandon, and what new approaches should they adopt to really thrive in this new era?
So I think both from a financial institution's perspective as well as for a corporate treasurer, we find it's evolving, but it's been a very siloed process. So you had somebody in procurement, somebody in treasury looking at working capital flows, and then the trade instruments, and then you had somebody else looking at the payments. So as I mentioned, from a financial institution perspective, we're trying to sort of break down those barriers and create much more of an ecosystem and really think a little bit more like our clients are thinking in terms of going to them to say, listen, you're end to end from procure to pay. Here's the suite or the solution set that can really guide you through this process and give you an access to that, like a single platform where you have access to all of that. And then similarly on the treasury side, like from the corporate perspective, they were driven and they probably pulled us along a little bit faster than sometimes we can move. But from a corporate's perspective, their treasury teams are becoming lean and they have to be even more efficient. And again, as they're navigating the changing landscape, they want to be certain that they can get what they need in terms of the solution, mitigate those payment risks, and be able to continue to be successful in exploring either new markets and or in the markets that they're continuing to work with today.
Great. Excellent, excellent. And how can businesses effectively balance the competing priorities of supply chain resilience and cost efficiency then? Because you've mentioned, how volatile the global environment is right now. How can we really get some balance there?
It's a perfect segue from it's the result, if you will, of some of the work that we're trying to do, and as looking at the various solutions a little bit more in an ecosystem as opposed to siloed. So it is about sitting down with your partner and both from a client and supplier relationship, but also with their banking partners to understand, okay, here's my situation, here's what I'm looking at. I do need to carry a little bit more inventory because I'm not quite sure what the market is going to look like in 6 months or 12 months from now. What type of solutions? What we're finding is the conversations are evolving from, we're not just purely capital providers. The clients want a more fulsome conversation and how can you support me and what partners do you have? And that's one of the great things about being here at Sibos, right? As financial institutions, we are competitors, but we're also suppliers, if you will, and we partner together to be able to offer solutions and to help our clients through that time.
Great. And what role can banks play then in the evolution of global trade finance? And how is Scotiabank particularly helping clients navigate these complex trade finance challenges right now across multiple jurisdictions and currencies?
The building of the trust and the resilience and demonstrating resiliency. So not only as a Canadian bank proud of what our banking system can offer, but again bringing that notion of not just the capital and the lending, but that solutions-based advice and helping businesses understand and then mitigate the various risks. We talked about, going from a new, rethinking globalization and looking at new partners. That can sometimes mean being exposed to different risks that they may or may not have encountered in the past. So dealing in different geographies, there's different regulatory and tax environments, there's obviously currency risk. So looking at that fulsome suite, again, going back to that concept of the ecosystem, so whether that's on the payment side and looking at the various currencies, so FX risk and hedging solutions, obviously there's some capital. When there's excess liquidity, what to do there as well. And we're seeing that's a trend as well. People want to just be a little more cautious with their liquidity. So again, sitting down, having that solutions-based approach and guiding them with expertise and on-the-ground knowledge, which for Scotiabank, we're fortunate to have people on the ground in the markets that are key right now. And as we reference Latin America as an example, we have team members and a whole group of bankers who can really be there and give the actual feel of what's going on in those markets.
Excellent. And what innovations in trade finance technology are having the most meaningful impact on cross-border commerce right now, and which areas still need significant improvement, would you say?
So let me start with the exciting parts first. So we are looking at automating and digitizing more and more. So, 5-10 years ago here at Sibos, the big thing was blockchain. Mm-hmm. So while we have, moved forward and there are various DLT use cases. We're actually hearing a lot here, right, about stablecoin and tokenization of assets. But in the trade space specifically, we have been able to introduce digitization and to a little bit more nascent the AI piece. And it's really complementing the trade experts that we have in our operations and middle office functions, who are subject matter experts and really keep everybody safe and make sure that we're supporting the client with the right structures. But with those tools, we are able to offer a better client experience. Where we're evolving and some of the investments and our priorities for the next 12 to 24 months are really looking at platforms, bringing a single experience, one platform coming into the bank right across all the geographies where clients can look at their key liquidity positions, but can also then move money around as well as issue trade instruments. And then specifically in certain, in our South American region, we are looking at a regional platform, again, with the idea of having a consistent client experience for our working capital, so both supply chain and factoring solutions.
Excellent. Well, all sounds really great, Dyanne. And like I say, really exciting times ahead on that front as well. But keep us posted as you go forward. And it's been really great speaking with you today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference as well.
Thank you. You too, Paul. It's been great.